So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Our district educators are focused on supporting our students and families as we respond with the whole world to the horrific death of George Floyd. The energy of social justice is flowing strong, and we want to support you in thoughtful and productive engagement to make our world a more just place with and for your children. Now I would like to introduce our educators who are central in planning tonight's work and will be presenting different portions of this presentation. Noelle Baxter, our District Supervisor of Social Studies. Scott Bortnick, our Principal of Brunner Elementary School. Colleen Halbert, our Principal of Evergreen Elementary School. Charlene Jackson, our first grade teacher from Coles Elementary School, and Adrian Stack, our fifth grade teacher from Park Middle School. We also have some partners with us from Social Justice Matters this evening, Joan Peters and Tashira Wheeler. I also know that in our viewing tonight, we have members from Truth, Racial Healing, Transformation, and we are partnering in much of this work moving forward. Next, I would like to introduce Colleen Halbert, who will be talking about the norms of the conversation this evening.
So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this very important conversation. As we begin our evening, we want to set the stage for the norms that provide a safe environment to have this type of dialogue. The norms we will be using are called the 4 agreements of courageous conversations. Number 1, stay engaged. Staying engaged means remaining morally, emotionally, intellectually, and socially involved in the dialogue. We will not disconnect from the topic, but we will actively listen and stay focused. Number 2, experience discomfort. This norm acknowledges that discomfort is inevitable, especially in dialogue about race, and that participants make a commitment to bring issues into the open. It is not talking about these issues that create divisiveness. The divisiveness already exists in the society and in our schools. It is through dialogue, even when uncomfortable, that healing and change begin. Number 3, speak your truth. This means being open about thoughts and feelings and not just saying what you think others want to hear. Number 4, expect and accept non-closure. This agreement asks participants to hang out in uncertainty and not rush to quick solutions, especially in relation to racial understanding, which requires ongoing dialogue. This means understanding that we are not having one standalone conversation, but that we will continue our dialogue in an ongoing manner. Tonight, we are not here to tell you how to have the conversation with your children or as a family. We are here to share how we as educators frame and facilitate these discussions in our classrooms. And tonight, we also want you to share your voice. So please post questions throughout the presentation. We will try to address as many as possible tonight, and we'll follow up with communication as well. The link to the question form is on this slide, and it was also shared with you in an email earlier today. Thank you and enjoy the evening.
Thank you, Colleen. Now I would like to introduce Noelle Baxter, who is going to speak to components of child development and curriculum. Noelle?
Thank you. So tonight, I'd like to talk about some of the social studies concepts that we have embedded in our curriculum in Scotch, Plains-Fanwood from our pre-kindergarten classrooms all the way through grade 12. 2 of the key concepts that we're going to highlight tonight include how are people similar to and different from one another. This is a concept that students will be studying, again, starting in our youngest classrooms all the way up through grade 12 in increasing complexity and sophistication. Tonight, in particular, we're going to focus on how we talk about racial and cultural diversity in the elementary curriculum. The second key concept we're going to cover is how do people make the world a better place? Again, this is a question that we ask students to study starting in pre-kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And tonight we're going to focus on how people stand up against injustice. When we teach about racial and cultural diversity, we have to think about the developmental levels of the children in terms of what they know and what they can understand. So we know that children at young ages can recognize racial, gender, and age differences. They recognize groups of people, and they also notice the social patterns and norms that are associated with those groups of people. Children as young as age 5 notice when people are treated differently based on a particular group that they might belong to, including racial categories. So the challenges that we face as educators is to think about how our brains naturally want to create categories to understand the world that are oversimplified. Our brains want to take in new information and place it neatly into categories that don't always really match the way that the world actually is. So our brains want to overemphasize differences between groups. Our brains want to think that different groups of people are very distinct and very different from each other, and that helps us keep them separate. Our brains also want to overestimate similarities within the group. So if a person belongs to a particular group, we want to be able to associate all of the characteristics of the group with that particular person. So the challenge that we have is training our brains to take the complex route instead of the simple route, because the world is more complex than that. When we talk about racial and cultural diversity in the classroom, we focus on many different concepts, but one concept in particular that we focus on is the idea of a common humanity. So we want students to understand that regardless of the racial group or cultural group that a person belongs to, there are certain things that all people around the world do share. We also want them to know that the people within the group are not all the same and that they do have unique qualities that make them unique individuals. We also ask students to consider the fact that people belong to many different groups at the same time. So students can identify the different communities that they belong to, the different groups that they belong to, and think about how those characteristics of those groups may apply to them, but also how they are unique individuals within those groups as well. When students can recognize that type of diversity, they start to understand that diversity makes the world a rich and meaningful place to be. We also know from research that students need explicit conversations about these topics in order to shape their understanding. When we don't have the conversations with them, they just create their own stories. They listen to what they hear and they notice what they see, and they will write their own stories if we don't guide them through that conversation. We know that younger children can be impacted more easily with these conversations, and so it's really important to start helping students at a young age to practice that flexible and complex thinking so they can continue to do that as they get older. Starting in grades pre-kindergarten up through 5th grade in particular, we focus on the question, how are people similar to and different from one another? So depending on the grade level, the children will study different topics related to this question. But in particular, we focus again on this idea that individuals are unique, but they do share their characteristics with the groups that they belong to. We help the children to understand that you can make connections with people based on what you have in common, but also learn from each other and enjoy each other's special qualities based on the diversity and uniqueness of each person. Across the grade levels, we also focus on the idea that the people across those cultures do share some things in common. We explore that through a framework called the cultural universals. So cultural universals are categories of behaviors that we can see in every culture that can include family, education, transportation, or shelter. And when we compare cultures, we look at what they do in those categories, and then we can appreciate the different way that they do those things in unique ways. The second theme we're going to focus on is recognizing injustice and standing up for justice. So those of you with young children know that by age 5, children have a very strong concept of unfairness. They know when things are not equally divided, they know when someone is not following the rules, and they feel that very intensely. So our challenge is that young children know that when they witness and experience unfairness or injustice, it hurts. It doesn't feel good, and often they can feel empowered to do anything about it. So part of what we focus on in teaching children is to make sure that they do understand what they can do to make the world a better place. We help them to understand, again, starting in pre-kindergarten all the way through, that actions both big and small make a difference. We also help them to learn about other people across place and time who have stood up for for justice, and we look at the obstacles that they face and the ways that they overcome those obstacles. So even when it's difficult, the children can feel a sense of empowerment to make changes in their communities. And with this theme, we want to really emphasize the idea that empowerment helps the children to develop resilience. Resilience is what's going to protect them when they experience or witness injustice. The effects of that trauma can be mitigated by the students having a sense of confidence and empowerment to make changes in their world. So those questions in the elementary classroom can look like, how do people make the world a better place? How can I be a good friend? How can I be a good classroom citizen? What have other people done to improve their communities? And what can I do to make the world a better place? So even though we've been doing this work for many years now in the social studies curriculum, we know that we have more work to do. And so over the next couple of years, a main focus for us in the elementary curriculum will be to ensure that our curriculum and instruction about racial diversity and racial injustice is more explicit. We want to make sure that the topics are covered more directly with the children so that they have a clear understanding of what those things mean. We also will continue to ensure that the materials and resources we provide to students are diverse, accurate, and positive. In closing, I just want to share something from the National Association for the Education of Young Children. In this quote, they talk about our responsibility, and I believe that our responsibility includes educators and parents together. Our responsibility is to give accurate, developmentally appropriate, matter-of-fact information that helps children develop the conviction that when the world is unsafe, there are always people who are working to make it safe.
Thank you, Noelle. Now I would like to introduce Scott Bortnick to talk about the student learning experiences.
Thank you, Dr. Mass. Thank you, Noelle, for getting us started tonight. We're going to continue this funnel from really big ideas down to what actually happens in the classroom. And I'm going to kind of guide you through our thinking with regards to lesson plan development and how we structure things in the classroom so that we can actually engage with children, as Noelle said, from pre-K right up through high school seniors in these really important conversations. So we do this at the elementary level largely by exploring these topics through literature. And I would recommend to parents who are here tonight, that literature is a wonderful way of opening an opportunity to have a conversation with your children. There are incredible books that are available that help you explore what could be difficult conversations to have. Tonight, we're going to look at some lessons that were developed for grades pre-K through 2, and then I'm going to walk you through some lessons that were developed for grades 3 through 5. In the pre-K through 2 band, we're looking at the big ideas that we all share similar needs, wants, and dreams. And when we can find what we have in common, we can work together and understand each other. We're also working on the big idea that our similarities help us to understand how we are interconnected. It's really about, learning more about each other so that we can learn more about ourselves. And then we're going to look at objectives with the children with the goal of helping the children learn that they can make their world a better place through their actions, both big and small. And you heard that when Noelle was talking about curriculum focuses, and now you're hearing it again with lesson objectives. In a little while, the teachers are going to speak, and you'll hear again how these lessons work to empower kids. When children are scared, knowing that they can make a difference, that they can have an impact on things that are impacting them, helps them to feel hopeful and resilient. So all of our kids in grades pre-K through 2 are going to engage in these conversations through a book called Come With Me. It's by Holly McGee and illustrated by Pascal Lemiche. And this is a really beautiful book that starts with a little girl who's, sitting in a room, and she's sharing that she's scared of the things that she's seeing and hearing on the news that are dealing with violence and hate. And she goes to her parents to share her feelings, and her parents wisely say to her, "Come with me." And they take her out into the world and help her see that there are good people that are doing great things and that she can be a part of the work to make the world a better place. The book continues with these experiences for the little girl, and she ultimately feels empowered to do something herself, and she goes out with a friend, and together they do things in their community that make their community a better place. And it's just a really beautiful message about no actions are too small to make the world a better place. That'll be a book that's explored with pre-K and kindergarten students. Then in addition to that book, our first graders are going to be engaged with a book called Say Something by Peter Reynolds. This is a really wonderful book, again, about empowerment. And Peter Reynolds does a really, I think, very smart job throughout the book of showing lots of different examples of when kids can say something, when they see something that's not happening, that's fair, when they see something that's not just. And it's all different sorts of situations to help children see that there's lots of things that they can do to make change in their world. Our second grade, in addition to exploring Come With Me, we'll be looking at the book The Day You Begin by Jacqueline Woodson, another just really beautiful book visually and thematically. There's a really poignant, salient quote at the beginning of the book that says, "There will be times when you walk in a room and no one there is quite like you." And the book then follows students as they learn about the differences between themselves, but also through that process, learn about themselves. And the kids begin to see how when they're listening and trying to understand other people and their experiences, they all become better for that process. Thank you. In grades 3 through 5, as Noelle mentioned earlier, as the children get older, the topics become richer and more complex that we begin to explore with them. So in grades 3 through 5, we're looking at the big ideas about injustice as a situation in which the rights of people or a group of people are ignored, disrespected, or discriminated against. And we do that through looking at pictures with students of things that kids can very easily pick up and say, that's not fair. And then we can make the connection between their concept of not fair and the larger concept of injustice. People, the other big idea that we look at through this lens with this book is that people have the power to make change when they see something that's unfair or unjust. And again, that the idea that actions both big and small can help to combat injustice and solve problems. Through these experiences, we'll be working with the students to help them learn that injustices do occur and they can identify them and they know them when they see them, and to help them recognize the importance of standing up against social injustice. And finally, that children can make the world a better place through their actions. The book that we're going to use to help generate this conversation and these experiences for our students is a really powerful text. It's written by 3 psychologists, Ann Hazard, Marianne Solano, and Marietta Collins. It's a book called Something Happened in Our Town. This is a book that explores, these 2 children that you see on the cover here, finding out about the shooting of an unarmed African-American man in their community by the police. And the kids say in the beginning of the book, the adults don't think we know about it, but we do. And I think it's a really powerful statement about how our kids are hearing and learning about things and picking up on things. And then, very smartly, the authors explore how 2 families, the little girl's family, who's a white family, and the little boy's family, who's an African-American family, talk to their children about the event that happened in their town. The big takeaway for this that we're hoping for the kids is that they realize that due to different lived experiences, families have different perspectives of the same situation. And what we're showing the kids and showing anybody who's reading the book is that these perspectives are not right or wrong. They're things that we need to try to understand about each other. And we need to try to understand the lived experiences that lead to these perspectives. And this book does a really beautiful job of highlighting that. It also then follows the story of a little boy named Ahmad who joins the school where these 2 children attend, and he's not treated fairly. And because of the conversations with the parents, the little boy and the little girl feel empowered to make a change for how people are treating Ahmad in their school. So again, it's that idea that we can stand up, we can recognize injustice because they see it, we can stand up to it when we do see it, and we can do something about it to make our world a better place.
So thank you, Scott, for identifying those big ideas and guiding questions. Now we're going to hear from Charlene Jackson to give us a perspective into her work with first graders.
Thank you, Dr. Mast, and good evening to everyone. As we've heard, we know that sometimes these conversations can be difficult, but the truth is that for our first graders, noticing racial differences in their classmates and in themselves is not uncommon. In fact, it comes to them naturally. But helping them to know how to understand those differences and that diversity, that's something that needs to be learned. And we know that in first grade, the teaching, along with the curriculum and the great books that we use in our classroom, it also comes through those teachable moments that we sometimes don't see coming. For an example, several years ago, it is the first day of school and I have a brand new student, and we all know how exciting it is on the first day of school. And toward the end of the day, we're preparing to do a writing activity, and we are on the carpet, we are brainstorming all the wonderful things that happened in our first grade class that day, and the hands are up, and I call on my new student who is new to our school, and he says, well, Mrs. Jackson, I had a great first day. And I'm like, fantastic. And he said, but I was really surprised when I met you this morning. And I said, well, I was surprised to meet you too. I was really happy though. And he says, but there was one thing that really surprised me. I thought you were white. And took a moment. We like to take those teachable moments. And I asked him, I said, well, that's okay, because it wouldn't really have mattered. But why did you think that? And he said, well, because my neighbors told me that you were a great teacher. And right then I realized that that child had given us a gift. And that gift was that right there on the first day of school, the conversation about race was open. And so we took a few moments and we diverted from what we were going to do. And we talked about the fact that we knew many people of different colors who had done great things. And some of the children affirmed that, yes, Mrs. Jackson was indeed a good teacher. And so it was wonderful to see how they joined in and they were able to share. And that's so important. And as the year goes on, beginning from that first day, creating a classroom environment where the children know they're respected, where they know that they can say things, and as long as they're saying things in an innocent way like this child was, he just wanted to know. We want them to feel like their questions or their comments are going to be addressed. And it's so important for us to do that. And we do that in many ways. We do it in reading books about building our community and doing community projects together and getting them to learn about each other. We also know how important it is early to acknowledge those differences and to find our common ground. One of the ways we do that in some of our first grade classrooms is a great book, It's Okay to Be Different. And the book by Todd Parr shows people of lots of different backgrounds, and they look different. And the children make their own book to show that it's okay to be different, however they are. We know that literature is powerful, and we use that in our class community throughout the year. We also know how important it is that children see themselves in books. So having a lot of multicultural books is important. Lastly, learning the history of others helps us to better understand the world. But most importantly, after all those things that we do, there's also a silent conversation in my classroom, and that is leading by example. So I know that the children, they're looking at me, they're looking at all of us, and they're looking for us to see how our actions speak. We know that they often speak louder than words. So I'm very grateful to be a part of that journey for my first graders in using all of the tools that we learn in our classroom to help them to be a better person as they go along, not only in school, but in the world. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk just a little bit about what we do in first grade when it comes to those courageous conversations.
Thank you very much, Charlene. Now I would like to ask Adrienne Stack to speak from her fifth grade perspective.
Good evening, everybody. Dr. Mass, thank you for that intro. What I want to begin with first is the importance of all of us coming together tonight to talk, because I've always felt that not saying anything says something, and that sends a message. And to have these discussions with our children, with our students, shows that we are strong as a community in Scotch Plains and Fanwood to talk about difficult topics. So the way in which I do this in a fifth grade classroom is creating a classroom from the very beginning of the year as a classroom community that fosters an open dialogue where students feel they can express their feelings, their emotions, their thoughts, and focus on how those feelings, thoughts, and emotions can impact other people. And the way to do that is in a really safe space to engage, to talk about creating norms where these guardrails are up so that students know how words can impact one another, how they can impact how we live our day, how we move through our day, and the topics that we share at home. Creating these norms creates a safe place to discuss difficult topics such as race. And as we've seen throughout history, is that the most challenging moments for us as a group have to come and be made through difficult conversations. And sometimes those conversations are uncomfortable. And that's when you know how imperative it is for us to have these conversations with children. Our students are consumers of media in so many ways right now in 2020. And what they see is they are observant. They see inequalities, they see injustice in the world right now, and most importantly, they see when a change is needed. So they're picking up on a lot of the messages that are out there. They're picking up on messages that are shown through actions, shown through words, but they're also seen in what is not said. And it is our job as educators to feed that need to address these concerns and these issues head on through these rich conversations. As Ms. Baxter talked about with curriculum, in fifth grade, we do address tough topics. We talk about the Middle Passage and the implications of that. We talk about slavery and how that impacted an entire group of people. And what we're looking to do in our classrooms is to empower students to engage with and react to the issues of the past. It is incredibly important to recognize the past that our country holds, share with one another how we have grown as a country through movements like the Civil Rights Movement, but most importantly, to recognize the work that we as a country, as a people, still need to do. The complexities of race that minority students, specifically Black students, experience daily is very important for all students to recognize and address. It's our responsibility to encourage the conversation of race, to give students the opportunity to sympathize, and most importantly, to understand and to know. This can serve as a really positive way to guide all students into becoming better citizens. I say to my students every year, throughout the year, they're probably sick of me saying it, where they are the future's leaders. And it's true. One day they will take the helm and it will be their task to make an imprint on the world. And through these tough discussions, we hope to give them the tools to make even better decisions than what we're seeing in the past and even today. Conversations are very important. I've had many conversations with parents of my students where they have said my lessons on things like race have wound up at the dinner table. And that, I hope, is a catalyst for families to have what sometimes appear to be very difficult and uncomfortable conversations. But as I said earlier, to give children and you, the parents, the opportunity to have this dialogue about race is very, very important. So to encourage students to question the events that are going on in the world and to validate their thoughts and feelings gives them a voice. And that is what we strive as teachers, as educators, is to help every student find his or her voice. So as I said in the beginning, our work at its core is to say something. So to have a discussion means we don't stay silent, because staying silent really does send a message. So I applaud everyone here for coming tonight, and thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of it.
Thank you, Adrienne. So I would like to highlight some of the resources that we think are important for families to know about. And some of them might be obvious and some of them might not be as obvious. So for example, your child's teacher is an excellent resource if you are wondering how to approach certain topics. And they can give you insight into what is or what is not happening in the classroom. That your building principal is also a very good resource. Our media specialists in each school are very familiar with different texts and books that are available, and they are generating lists of resources to share. We also have our student assistance counselors. If your child is struggling with the current events or is having any types of disruptions with their daily routines, you can reach out to your principal to get in touch with the student assistant counselors. Additionally, we have some community resources, and they're very important to us. Both the Scotch Plains Public Library and the Fanwood Memorial Public Library will also gather resources for us around anti-racism to provide you with resources to work with your children at home. The district is a very proud partner with both the Township of Scotch Plains and Fanwood and a group called Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. Right now, this group, TRHT, is very interested in listening to the community and opening opportunities for us to have discussions around race. And there will be more information about that to come. If you are interested, there is an email posted here. And additionally, we do have some representation this evening from Social Justice Matters. So I would like to introduce Joan Peters and Tashira Wheeler to just give a little bit information about Social Justice Matters, please.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Mast, and everybody for having us on this forum. I don't know how many of you know Social Justice Matters even exists, but we have been here for 11 years, a nonprofit grassroots group that's dedicated to working towards an equitable community. You probably know us from Martin Luther King Day, because that's what we're best known for. But we do a lot of activities during the year that engage kids, adults, in conversations about race and racial things tangential to race, like housing and voting, etc. We have a webpage, as you see, and it is really well done. It's got lots of resources for everybody at this time in our history, and especially for kids. And we'd love to have you join as supporters and get our newsletter and be aware of what's going on, because we're also a part of Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. And we're hoping to move the needle here in Scotch Plains and Fanwood. So again, thank you for having us. And I'll turn it over to Tashira, who's the chair of the Juneteenth Committee.
Good evening. Thank you, Joan, and thank you, Dr. Mast, as well as Dr. Slocum, for this invitation to be here and speak to this evening. Just to give you a little bit of background on Juneteenth. Juneteenth is an American holiday that celebrates and recognizes the end of slavery in the United States. On June 19, 1865, General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, and announced the end of the Civil War and the end of chattel slavery in the United States. This announcement came 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation and 2 months after the end of the Civil War. At the time of this announcement, there were approximately 250,000 enslaved men, women, and children still in the state of Texas. This holiday is now recognized and celebrated in 47 out of our 50 states, including New Jersey. Our celebration this year is ever more important because for its backdrop, we have the health pandemic of COVID-19 and the racial pandemic that has been heightened by the death of George Floyd. In recognizing this most important holiday, we have to come to grips with a hurtful past that has perpetuated systems within our country that prevent equal access to basic human rights. I mention this not to dampen the celebration, but to emphasize the need to celebrate freedom and justice for all. Our celebration this year is a video program which features our community leadership, Scotch Plains-Fanwood High School students and alumni, as well as other community members who will share reflections on what freedom is and means to them. I am so thrilled to be working with Dr. Slocum and our elementary school students throughout the district because they will be creating a community freedom quilt. And through their visual images, they will be able to show what freedom means to them. I hope that you will join us in this celebration and continue to be open to discussions on race, freedom, equality, and justice. If you are interested in being a part of this, please feel free to email me. My contact information is tashirabwheeler@yahoo.com. And I will pass that information on to whomever is interested in being a part of it. Thank you so much for having me this evening.
Thank you very much, Joan and Tashira. Now we're going to move into the Q&A section of our program tonight. I see that there are many very good questions coming in, and I just need to say up front, we are not going to be able to address all of them on this forum, but we are going to compile all of the questions, and we're going to create a document, and we will then publish that as early as possible. And we will send it out to all of our parents. So I'm going to go to the questions that have been coming in now, and there are quite a few. So this question is, how do I handle it when my child says something mean about another race? How do you handle it in the classroom? And I would like to rely on Mr. Bortnick to talk about how you as a principal handle such a situation, or how do you guide your teachers in handling that type of situation? Mr. Bortnick, are you there?
I am. I'm sorry. You cut out on me, so I didn't hear the question. Can you just say it again for me, please?
Yes. How do you handle it the question is, how do I handle it when my child says something mean about another race? How do you handle it in the classroom?
So I'm going to tell you some the situations that we've had, and I think there's probably others on here who could speak to this as well. I think those are the times where we typically, not to totally steal a common phrase these days, but lean into those conversations with children, where when we hear something, we will say to the students who say it, I heard you say those kids. I heard you say, this statement. Tell me what you meant by that. It's important for us to say what it is that we heard and find out what's behind it. Because when we know what's behind it, then we can teach to it. And then we can help with addressing the perspective that the student has. It's too important of a conversation to simply say, you can't say that, and kind of yelling type response at a student. These are the conversations that I think as educators, I think Charlene's story so beautifully captures it. Like we're very busy throughout the day, and we're moving like lightning. And then something like this happens, and it's like the world stops. It when you hear it, and you're like, I need to address that. And I've seen lots of teachers around the district really just pause and say, oh, I heard you say this. Tell me more about that. And that's enough to sometimes, startle people into realizing something, but it's often a great opportunity for digging in and getting to what's behind that so that it can be addressed.
There's a question here where it says, do you have data statistics regarding the diversity of the educators in the district? Could you provide a list? So that's one question. And what I would like to say is we could provide that specific data when we publish the Q&A. It is a topic that we are aware of, and we really want to work on with great intention, that our faculty reflects our students. And we could start working on it now, but I also want to say that next year we will be creating a strategic plan. And within that plan, we would like to have a committee serve on helping us to really focus on hiring practices that not only bring the best educators to the district, but diverse educators to reflect our student population. Thank you for that question. What I'd like to ask next is, based on current events and conversations, how do you plan to continue to evolve the curriculum for all grades? And I know that curriculum is something that is very dynamic. I know that current events often provides opportunities to teach concepts and reinforce some of the big ideas that were discussed earlier in this presentation. But I'm wondering if Dr. Slocum would be willing to respond to how the curriculum evolves, at McGinn Elementary School, and then that would be similar across the district. Dr. Slocum, are you here?
I'm so sorry. Everything is freezing for me right now, too. And I missed your question as well. Must be it.
It must be me. So I wanted to know if you could speak to how the curriculum at McGinn evolves based on current events.
That's a great question, and can be answered in many ways from our teachers. So our teachers do a wonderful job of connecting what they are teaching at the time with with current events. So, for example, with the events that have just occurred with children witnessing protests and very scary news and learning about racism on a deeper level, some of our teachers have responded by connecting what kids can do to provide to find ways to help children realize that they do have a voice, they do have a means of responding, just as our teachers earlier today were in the presentation we're talking about. So some teachers connected the children's voice to their ability to speak with their families, their ability to use their persuasive writing, which they've learned about, their opinion writing in school, to write letters to people that can help them make change. So that's an example, but teachers try to give as many examples from what they've already taught to students to connect to what the current events are in order to make them authentic and understandable and relatable to the children.
Thank you, Dr. Slocum.
Thank you.
The next question is, how much leeway do teachers have to include other concepts about Black history in the curriculum? For example, inventors and contributors. When do students learn about them? I'd like to ask Noelle Baxter to respond to this question.
Sure. So it's a great question, and it's something that certainly is influencing the work that we're currently doing with the elementary curriculum and that we'll continue to do. So right now, the way that our curriculum is written is around those key concepts like I shared earlier. There are other key concepts in addition to the ones that I shared, but generally, the teachers are provided with the key concepts and understandings that the children are expected to understand. And then the teachers will often choose the case studies or the examples that they use to illustrate those examples for the children. Sometimes those examples will be driven by the student interest or by the particular students in that classroom at the time. And so teachers, for example, in first grade, teach a unit about how people make their communities better. So the core case studies that we use would be the same in the classrooms, and then teachers can expand upon that doing different examples. But one of the things that we're focused on right now is ensuring that the experience is consistent for all children, that they all do have exposure to a diverse range of those types of examples. So even though we want to provide the teachers with some flexibility, again, so that they can address the particular interests of their students or something that might really be resonating with their class at the particular time, we also want to make sure that every child is experiencing, again, exposure to a very diverse curriculum. So we're going to continue to look for specific examples where we can embed that into the curriculum. Often that will also be dependent upon the resources that we can find. So for example, with first graders, we need to be able to find books that if a teacher reads it to the students, that the students can really comprehend and understand, or we might be looking for books that the children can read independently. So sometimes that will limit the examples that we can use with them. But the good thing is that more things are being published all the time that really do broaden the range of people, for example, that the children can learn in terms of reading their biographies of a more diverse range of people. So again, it is a balance of making sure that the children do have a consistent experience and that they all are aware of the diverse groups of people who have contributed to this country. And so we're going to continue to look for those specific examples that we think really do benefit all of the children. And then again, still allowing the teachers to expand and elaborate in situations where the children might have a particular interest or particular resources that really speak to the kids.
Thank you, Noelle. There's a question here. It was noted that diverse literature for children is critical. Do you have any statistics data regarding the diversity of literature that is available in the classroom across various grade levels? This is a very important question, and it is something that we have been focused on for the past couple of years at least. We had a curriculum meeting this year where the statistics about children's literature was brought forward, where 1% of children's literature is about American Indians, 5% is about Latinx, 7% of the literature is about Asian Pacific Islander, Asian Pacific American, 10% is about African American, 20% of children's literature is about animals, and 50% is about white children. We did have a presentation at the board curriculum committee where it was where we're working very intentionally to make sure that the literature that students read provide both mirrors to themselves and windows to the world. So it addresses kind of these disturbing statistics. The next question I would like to ask is, will you be highlighting the general importance of law enforcement? We are from a family of law enforcement, and a great many of us go out every day and leave their own families to help others. I'd like Dr. Dumaresque to respond to this question, please.
Absolutely. I think this is a really important question to ask, not just during this time, but during, all the time. We can't be, we're not putting any groups against each other. I think that's what the important lesson is. We're not trying to paint any groups as good, any groups as bad. We're not saying that all of a sudden now police are the enemies. That's a really important message for our young students to know, because our police, and I know that we have a close relationship with our Fanwood and Scotch Plains police officers. They help keep us safe. And it's important for kids to know that police officers help keep us safe, and that they need to trust the law enforcement officials who police our town. So the message is certainly, when we teach these books to the students this week, and when we teach all issues of race and diversity and racism in the future, it's not about pitting two groups against each other. So to answer the question, yes, we will certainly highlight the importance of seeing things in shades of gray and taking, all actions into account, but certainly not pitting two groups against each other, or painting one group as good or one group as bad.
Thank you, Dr. Dumaresque. The next question I would like to bring forth is, middle passage wasn't discussed this year with fifth graders, as the social studies curriculum has been cut out of the virtual learning. So now we have the entire fifth grade who didn't get to talk about any of those issues. When will they be learning about this important history? So that question is a very good one, just for a couple of reasons. That we certainly know that at-home learning has disrupted our curriculum flow in ways that is going to be very important for us to assess topics that weren't covered, to assess where children are in all curriculum areas. And in this specific topic about middle passages, I'm going to go back to Noelle Baxter to see what she has to say about this.
Sure. So that is definitely a topic that will be taught again, in particular in the 7th grade. So the 5th grade curriculum and the 7th grade curriculum do have a little bit of an overlap because of the way that the courses have been designed. And when we look at planning for the next couple of years in terms of instruction, the lasting impact of what students have missed out on over the last couple of months will be with us for a while. But this is certainly a topic that we know is critical for the students to understand. And we've been working really hard in the 7th grade as well to really think about, again, what are those core understandings that students need to have, and how are we ensuring that students can wrestle with those concepts? We know that 7th graders are a little bit more capable of understanding those types of topics compared to the 5th grade, but we are certainly very aware of that particular gap. But again, it is something that we're focused on currently, even without the gap in learning between 5th and 7th grade now, to think about what are the most effective ways of teaching that content to the students. So again, in 7th grade, we'll have to really take a look at how we incorporate more instruction on the topics that we know have been missed in 5th grade, in addition to just continuing to work on improving the way that we teach that topic in general.
Okay, and I have time for one more question, but just to reemphasize that we will make a list of all of these questions and have written responses available to you. So On days when teachers had major classroom discussions on race, could they notify parents that we know to discuss at dinner? Sometimes my son doesn't tell me what he did at school during the day, so I want to make sure I don't miss opportunities to reiterate these important conversations. So I think I would ask Dr. Weatherall to respond to how can we alert parents about important conversations that are occurring.
That's a great question. My hope is that we're having these conversations more often than not. So I wouldn't want to have a big announcement that today we had a discussion about race. I think these discussions need to be ongoing and, like I said, more often than not happening. I think if there's an incident in the classroom where there's an injustice, those are the days that the teacher would reach out to the parents and let them know that this was a topic that came up, or this is a comment that was stated, and this is how it was addressed, and then you might want to talk about it. But as far as all the celebrations of diversity, I don't know if there's a way to say that this happened today, it happened tomorrow, it's going to happen the next day. I know a lot of our teachers do newsletters that go out, and there are some talking points that are put into the newsletters. The teachers can certainly go ahead and put, these are some of the talking points of some of the things we discussed this week or this month, and that might help have some more conversations at the dinner table. I don't know if any of our teachers had some additional ideas about how, or any of the other principals.
Thank you, Dr. Weatherall. I think that I think this is a good place to just to put a comma to this conversation, because as we said earlier, you know, this work is ongoing. This is our effort to start a conversation that is very timely now, to share with parents literature that we are going to be working with students on before school ends, and also to just emphasize that we are committed to have these conversations about race. We invite the whole community to join the TRHT conversations that will be happening, and there will be more information about that too. As our curriculum work is ongoing, Noelle Baxter will be giving regular updates on how our curriculum is dynamic and how things will be happening, you know, in our whole pre-K through 12 system. We do want to take a closer look at that, and we do want to make sure that topics are happening systemically. So on that, this is going to be a place where I just want to thank you again for joining us at this meeting for this conversation, and we look forward to having additional conversations in the near future. So thank you very much for everyone who put this presentation together. There were people who spoke tonight, but there were also key people behind the scenes, and I am just very happy to have such a good team, both in the district and in the community, to do this work with. And I have the good fortune to go off to my next online meeting, which is celebrating our student awards tonight. So we will be in touch very soon. Have a good night.